When done properly, self-employment can be the most freeing and flexible mechanism to uplift someone's career and life. For too long, we've been led to believe that only two types of people can have an extraordinary creative career: creative genius and people who hustle so hard that they're working all the time. Here on the Everyday Talent Podcast, we are shattering that myth. This podcast is built on one truth, which is every one of us can have an extraordinary creative career. The way to get there is not by sacrificing all of ourselves to our work, but rather embracing our authentic selves and carve out unique paths to a fulfilling and joyful creative life. Hello and welcome. My name is Betty. I'm a creative and a coach for creators. I've coached photographers, filmmakers, visual artists, arts consultants, and arts leaders to make intentional career shifts and build thriving independent practices. This podcast is for you if you're looking to cut through the noise of what you should be doing in your creative career and figure out what actually works and matters for you. Before we begin, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your platform of choice. Leave us a rating and review and share this podcast on your social so that more amazing creatives out there can find out about this podcast and feel seen. Hey everyone, how is it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Talent Podcast. It's almost the end of 2023. As you think of the end of the year, usually what comes up? And I've been thinking about that a lot, that this is usually the time that some of us get panicked about the goals that we've set out of the year are not reached. Some of us are surprised by how far we've come in a year compared to at the beginning of the year. And some of us just want to crave for a break, and we deserve it. And some of us are already thinking about the next year, or maybe even 2 years out. So as we're all in different spots, I thought, what would be the best gift that I can give you as my audience at the end of the year? And I landed on today's topic. Truly, today's episode might as well be called The Secret Lies of Self-Employment. Instead, I call it 5 Truths That No One Tells You About Self-Employment. In this episode, what we're going to dive in things that I've learned in my own practice in the last 2 years as a self-employed creative, and also things that I've learned from other creatives that I've talked to and coached. And I've summarized 5 truths or 5 surprising things that I've learned that I would have never known if I didn't pursue the route of self-employment, in hopes that I can also share it with you who are either considering to pursue self-employment in 2024, or you might be in that accidental phase of self-employment, meaning you've been freelancing for a while and you're thinking, wait, this might be like a structure that I want to hold for the next little while or even for the foreseeable future. And I really need to think more intentionally about it and grow it in the way that is right to me. I dedicate this episode at the end of this year because over the last 2 years of my own practice, I've learned a lot. And I've also seen how, when done properly, self-employment can be the most freeing and flexible mechanism to uplift someone's career and life. But on the other end, it can also be just another toxic job that gives even more burden than a full-time job. So the possibility runs really wide in the gamut of things. And I hope by sharing this episode with you that you yourself can start to thinking intentionally and also be very real and consider the factors that you might need to face when you pursue self-employment and assess whether that's right for me. And coupled with this episode, I've also decided, for some of you who've been following me for a while, you know that at the end of every year, I usually have a planner tool for the new year for my audience to utilize and use for the planning. This year's planner tool, I've dedicated it to serve people in this bucket of self-employment. Or rather, if you see yourself as an independent creator, this is for you as well. I will talk more about this too as we go on in this episode, and at the end, I've titled this to as a better bucket list for independent creatives. And the reason that I call it a better bucket list, because bucket list is usually what we think of at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year. But if you ask me, I personally really hate the culture of bucket lists. Why? Bucket lists usually are very finite and very restrictive. It's literally a checklist. It's usually also very subject to general trends of what should people be doing. If one year people are thinking, oh, have more uh, we should follow a certain kind of fashion style, for example, then people might translate that in their bucket list. We should be more conscious about our spending. So people might put that in their bucket list. Sometimes we do so much people pleasing in our bucket list that we forget about ourselves in our own bucket list. And sometimes for those of us who question, should I have a bucket list? They're already still thinking whether they need to have a bucket list. So it's a very, very strange phenomenon in my mind. And also, bucket lists can either be very underachieving or too overachieving. We put our widest streamer bucket list, or we put the things that we are already well on track of, and just so that we can check it off by the time January kicks off. So for all of that, I want to my planner to speak to that phenomenon and say that there's actually a way to do planning for independent creatives that can be intentional. I will give you the dimensions that will help you to set up your independent practice in a more productive way that is true to yourself and taking in factor of the growth that you want for the practice as a business and the growth you want as an individual. Again, I'll talk more about this planner tool as we go on in this episode. I would just plant a seed here and say that there are two ways that you can get the planner tool for a limited time. One is you can pay a direct small fee for it, $15, or you can take a few fun actions and get it for free. I will talk about that at the end of the episode, so stay tuned for that. Now, let's get back on track to today's topic, which is 5 truths that no one else tells you about self-employment. What are those 5 truths? Let me start the first one. Time flexibility is only meaningful if it's reinforced consistently. Let me repeat that because that sentence can be a little bit lofty. Time flexibility is only meaningful if it's reinforced consistently. We are hear that often that one of the biggest gifts and benefits of self-employment is time flexibility. You get to decide when you work and how long you work, right? And that is true, I would say, to a certain extent. And I've observed this as kind of like an interesting phenomenon, and or someone that like sometimes I take a step back and observe this as if it's not related to me, like from a scientist mindset. Because what happened personally in the last 2 years is that at the beginning of 2022, I became officially self-employed full-time, running my creative business, consulting, coaching, and filmmaking. And earlier on, 2023, my partner also turned self-employed. So we both are in that self-employed bucket right now. And so both of us got a lot of instances where people would come to us and talk to us about our time and how we manage our time. And recently, if you have heard the last episode, we also got married. And so we had incidents where like we were planning between personal, like family, like engagement and our own work. And one of the interesting observation I make is that people have like really wildly different assumptions about self-employed people's time. And it always falls under 2 extremes. One is they either assume we have so much agency around our time that we can literally do it anytime we want. And as long as we finish the task, our schedule is free. They can talk to us anytime, or we can take the day off on 24 hours notice to do something with them. So that's one extreme example. The other extreme is that people assume that we are working all the time, have no life now because work is money. We should say yes to everything. So don't bother Betty. She's probably like occupied with 1,000 things and never have time for fun and play and seeing people anymore. I find that very interesting, don't you? Because one of the things that is actually true about self-employment is that yes, time management and your workload falls under you to manage instead of another manager or your boss, but you still need to manage it. You still need to set up the right structure and boundaries so that you're not even just working, you're thriving, and you're being a human being. And what happens most of the time is that we need to do a little bit of like forecasting of our time and capacity so that we can be there for our clients, the people we serve, we can be there for ourselves, and we can be there for our family and loved ones. And this means no, we are not working all the time because that would just lead to burnout. If we're doing this right, we should be working for the time that we want to. However, on the other side, it does not mean that we're always free. It does not mean that we can have 24-hour notice and just shift things around. Because at the end of the day, whether you are a service-based self-employed person or you're jumping from project to project, you're often working in teams. You're working with clients, you're working with people. You've got meetings like you pre-booked like 2 weeks ago, and you're not moving them. And you're operating like a business, like professional business, or just a professional self-employed person. So knowing this, one of the great things that I learned over time then is that, okay, because you've so many choices to make suddenly about your time, flexibility can suddenly get lost if you're not the one that set your foot down and reinforce it consistently. Say you just leave your schedule kind of run wild and anybody can book it at any given time. Before you know it, you're actually that person that working all the time. And your schedule is full and you don't even have time to do the deep work that you need to. On the other end, if you're not setting up enough structure and planning to like set goals that what am I working on this week and what am I working on next week, sometimes on low season, you encountered a situation where I don't know how time has passed this past week, but I did nothing. I know those of you out there that know exactly how that feels. And those two zones are neither of that is good. And neither of that, by the way, feels flexible because on the one end, you feel so overwhelmed that you might as well just have a 9 to 5 job would be better than that. On the other end, you feel so unproductive that everything is free time, then nothing is meaningful. So flexibility is only meaningful then if you can design a structure around it and then practice it consistently. What does that mean? It means that you are giving yourself permission on your time and your schedule that allow yourself to take breaks, allow yourself to have deep work time, allow yourself to even have this, some people call CEO time, to do reflection about your business and do the business management itself. Allow yourself to have creative time that you are doing nothing except your creative engagement with the craft that you practice, and allow yourself to prioritize whatever is most important to you. Maybe this season is about spending more time with your family and you're scheduling that in your schedule. How things are showing up on your schedule consistently represents what you value. So I will give you a concrete example, two concrete examples actually. Right now, I don't work Friday afternoons unless it's absolutely necessary, which means like if I'm like there's a exceptional situation with a client, exceptional situation with myself, then I will be working. Otherwise, my calendar is booked off. No one can be going to book, like I have a calendar set up for a free discovery call, a consultation call, but it's never available on Friday afternoon. And what am I doing during that time? It's up to me. It's a reinforced flexibility. I can do some creative watercolor. I can be taking a walk. I can be working out. I can be going out to see a friend, which I've done multiple times using Friday afternoon. Whatever. I give myself that permission to be free during that time. And if need to be, I also give myself the permission to make the call and say, actually, this Friday afternoon, I need to address an exceptional situation with a client. Let me give you another example. I have a client called Vibe Arts. If you haven't listened to an episode where on the podcast where I interview Vibe Arts Executive Director Katie Hutchinson, I encourage you to listen to that episode, because if you listen to the episode, you know that they, since this beginning of this year, started reinforce a policy to take Fridays off. So their teams are never online on Fridays. If I send them emails on Friday, I know that I won't get a reply. I mean, in this case, it works out beautifully because I take Friday afternoon off too. But really, it's set up there so that you reinforce not just to themselves, but to outside that this is an organization that value flexibility, and that they believe that within 4 days, they can be as productive as a team compared to people who work 5 days, 5 days. And that for them, 4 days of work is full time. When we reinforce flexibility like that, what starts out as an idea or an aspiration, we want flexibility, we want to test out what a flexible schedule looks like, we turn into a habit. We practice Fridays off all the time. On Fridays, we never respond email or other ways that you can practice flexibility. And that idea turns into a habit. Eventually, it will become a practice, a belief, and most important thing, if you're an organization, you become a culture and a value. And that is eventually what you want for your own self-employed practice or in the organization for your organization. Because otherwise, flexibility is always one arm's length away from you, something that you aspire to and never actually reach. If it's not reinforced to yourself and to other people, it's not something that exists. So that's the first hard truth about self-employment, is that flexibility has to be practiced and reinforced. It doesn't come automatically just from the moment that you turn self-employed. It's something that you have to put work in to practice. And in my plenitude this year, because I know time, flexibility, and boundaries are often comes up so much for self-employed creatives. And lots of times, sometimes they feel that self-employed creatives come to me and say that they feel that their schedule has taken control of their lives instead of the other way around. They don't feel the agency around their schedule anymore. One of the ways I want to encourage you to ask better questions when you come up with your better bucket list is, how are you setting up your boundaries and flexibility? When you say that you want flexibility, what does that actually mean to you? Because it means different things for different people. And once you articulate what that means, how does it actually show up in your week to week? And where are you at now? Compare your ideal scenario and your current scenario. How might you close that gap this year? So that will be one of the biggest section in the planner tool. And if you're someone who would want to work on your time, I really encourage you to delve deep into those questions and articulate yourself so you can set better goals around boundary setting, flexibility, and time. The second hard truth that no one else tells you about self-employment is this. Once you become laser specific about what and who you want to work with, the right opportunities do come, and then some. I could have written this line about once you hone down your niche, you're going to attract people or opportunities within your niche and beyond your niche. But I feel like over the last couple of years, the word niche actually got a bad name because it's so often used as a sales or marketing tactic. And as I expand on this point more, I want you to think beyond that it's just a marketing mechanism. It is really about narrowing down who you want to work with and how you want to work and what you want to work on. It's really also about being very clear about why you do what you do and your mission and your passion. I'll use myself as an example in this case again. When I started out deciding that I would coach creators, individual coaching, Among my peers and friends, there were some concerned voices from time to time. People would ask me, well, this is great that you're coaching artists and creative, but aren't you worried that they can't afford you, that they don't have money? I've talked about this before, probably in my content in my IG or on the podcast, that right there, there's a mindset and perception about who artists or who creators are, and how much creatives should make that I personally don't agree with and want to like. That's precisely the why I do what I do to challenge those status quo and status quo thinking. But on the other hand, on a very practical level, whenever I hear those concern comments, it created like almost like a jarring effect in my head. I was like, oh, I never thought of that. And here's why. I actually don't think we have gone into coaching individuals had I not seen the gap in servicing creatives and artists in the first hand. As someone who had come from the arts, I never even heard of like leadership coaching or career coaching until one day when I was kind of lost in my career and navigating my own career. In serendipity, I met the leadership coach that I've since worked with for 4 or 5 years. Then, when I got into training to become a professional coach, I thought, how powerful would this be if I can provide this service for my peers, for the people that I've met, the incredible people that I've met in creative industries, in the arts. And that's what propelled me to offer my service. I never started them like as a jumping off point, like as a starting point for that coaching practice. I never started with like, I want to coach people. What's my niche? I really like started with the mission to serve individuals who are artistic, creative, and in my mind should deserve the support to navigate their career in a more intentional, supportive way. So the interesting thing that happened after I honed in and become laser specific about coaching creatives was that in the initial year, so 2022, when I think back, I think almost like 100% of the people, actually, maybe 95% of the people that I work with were working exclusively in creative fields, meaning they had a job in the creative field. You would call them artists or you would call them their role creative. That's the people that came to me for my coaching service. Then, as I built my practice, and in the second year, 2023, I noticed an interesting phenomenon. People who, quote unquote, do not necessarily have a job in the creative field also started coming to me. And I actually asked them in the discovery call, why? Why this? Why me? And I got interesting answers. Sometimes it's because they want my creative approach, that creative magic, some out of the box thinking to guide them for their specific career or business related goal. And sometimes it's because they also want to redefine what it means to have a creative career. And throughout that, you know what hasn't changed? My marketing and my focus and commitment to creative people. I have not pivoted a bit. If you go to my website, I still say that Betty is a creative career coach for creative people. I have, of course, refined and expanded the nuance of my service. So now, like from starting like 2 years ago when I started, I broadly coach creative people. I'm a career coach and I have one program. And now for example, this summer, I launched another one-on-one coaching program called Design Your Links that is specifically for serving self-employed creatives who are on the path to grow their independent practice and multifaceted links. And this is because I've kind of like gained more nuance of the different segments of creators. So, and I still want to serve their different needs and make sure that my service and program is to best to serve them at the different points of their career. Always to say, I have been pleasantly surprised that once I become so specific about who I serve, I started attracting people who are fall under that description and beyond. And this is not just something that is, again, a retroactive thinking of like, who might be my audience and I can attract them best and blah, blah, blah. It's true to what I believe is needed, and who I want to help. And that's what motivates me to show up to my work every day. So don't be afraid to be specific, whether it's in the approach that you do things or the people that you serve through your creative service. Again, some people say this is about honing your niche now. I don't like to say that, but if that helps, think about it through that lens. But I hope through this storytelling about my own experience, I've shown you that this is beyond a marketing thing. It's about connecting yourself to your values and mission. If you're a fashion designer who's passionate about sustainability and using local materials, go for it. Because that belief and that value is going to shine through your business. I've recently, for example, bought products from an earring company that specifically serve people who doesn't have their ears pierced. I'm one of them. And I read the founder's story, and the founder talks about how she also struggles for years looking for earrings for people who doesn't have their ears pierced. And she feels that people who doesn't have their ears pierced still deserve the opportunity for very comfortable earrings to be on their ears and look fabulous. I felt so seen by that story, and it's so specific. And I bought their products immediately. So be very specific. We live in the age where our stories and our values people really care about. The people who we serve care about it. The people who work on projects and collaborators care about that. And people who are our potential customers also care about that. And one thing that I recommend doing is also constantly allocate time and put yourself in the spot of gaining better understanding of the people you serve, because people also evolve. One of the things that I love doing is I hold space for coffee chats with creatives. I also, like, from time to time, do market research calls with creatives, understand their pain points, what they're facing, how's the post-pandemic different from pre-pandemic, what are the new challenges on the horizon. I find that those conversations also refresh our mind and connect our heart to why we do matter. Truth number 3: creative fulfillment is the first shoe to drop. So, as you are growing your self employed practice, you start getting paid projects and paid clients. Things are going great. It's going on an upward spiral in terms of your revenue. And you go, wow, things are going so well. I'm so busy. And now, what if I were to pinpoint one thing that's missing? What is it? Creative joy. You realize that you're slowly losing touch with your creative joy and that excitement that you get from your creative process. Why does this happen? In all honesty, the reasons are all personal. But if I were to generalize from what I observe in my coaching room and for myself, I think, and this is really my hypothesis, I think it's because that as creators, we are all somewhat rebels at heart. We like things to be different. If something is on repeat and we have to do it because we need to answer to our clients, we need to answer to projects, we have to show up on time consistently for certain things, it just doesn't hit that spot. You know what I mean? That spot in our heart where you say, "Ooh, I'm so in flow. I'm doing this because I love it. For no other reason am I doing this creative act other than the joy." And it's really like a little bit of paradox in when we are thinking about the business side of things and the creative side of things, because our heart says one way, and for business we want to have repeat, we want to have habits, we want to have returning projects and clients. So how do we solve for this? Right, we go that spot. I just want to also share that I myself also have experienced this in these last 2 years. It's not just you, clients, all of you out there. You're not alone. Take me for example. When I like to get lost doing something creative, I like a luxury amount of time. What I mean by that is like 2 to 3 hours in the evening doing watercolor, nothing else. No one can talk to me. It's just watercolor and classical music. If I'm doing creative writing, I want to have almost like whole morning block out doing creative writing. I'm not actually writing for that many hours, but sometimes I like to have things block out so that I can take a walk and get in the mode and get some meditation in before I do the writing. very much like a luxurious expanded space for myself. And I have to say, in the last 2 years, as there are some weeks, maybe even like 1 month or two, that I never squeeze in one session of what I just described in there. And it pains me after a while of not like even getting a creative session in. It pains me that it hasn't happened. And I need to be aware of that, because if it piles up, it creates this almost lack of motivation syndrome. It starts creating doubt in myself. Why am I even doing this? Am I supposed to not be creatively happy? I could have do a job then. I could have done like any other things other than what I'm doing. It's a downward spiral quickly if you notice that you've lost touch with your creative joy. And so, what's the solution? Again, I'll be honest, there's no one size fits all here for solution. For some people, setting a block out from week to week, I would actually recommend not every week, maybe every 2 weeks or every month, because again, something on repeat doesn't serve our creative, rebellious mind. Setting a block out to do something for yourself, that can be a win. My personal preference right now is also going with the flow and accepting that different season I can prioritize differently, or different months. For instance, in August, I kind of got a sense that in September, I would get a lot of space to do creative writing. Also, there were some deadlines that motivate me to do that. So in August, I took a more kind of approach of I would focus on my business side of things this month. September, my business side were more on the autopilot mode because I set up everything in August and I focused a lot of time in creative writing. And now October and November, it was kind of like a 50-50% kind of both. So right now, for me, what works is I forecast a little bit 3 months out. What months can I prioritize the create time, and what months that might take a backseat? And again, no perfect solution here. I'll be completely honest. But here's the one thing that I know: if you're not bringing awareness to it, it will be a tipping point for your satisfaction overall. Because if you ask any creative self-employed person, they got into self-employment because they value, one of the biggest reasons, they not just value flexibility, but creative joy, that they get the space to do it, or the assumption that self-employment would give you that space to do it. So in the planner tool, I've dedicated one session this year to expand on what creative satisfaction mean to you. And again, how does that translate into your week to week or into your action? It doesn't have to be rigid planning here, just a note, because again, rigidity can be your enemy here when you think about the serendipity, uh, the free flowness that you're pursuing with creative process. But articulating it and putting it on prioritization is definitely going to help. So as you listen to this episode, I also encourage you maybe just to take a pause. How am I doing with my creative satisfaction? On a scale of 0 to 10, where would I sit? And if I were to make a shift, what needs to happen? Lesson number 4, or truth number 4, learning number 4 as well. I've lost track how I could calling these things, but number 4 on that list, which is saying no is one of the greatest signs of growth. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, this particular point might make you feel like I'm a broken record by this point, because I've talked about this point so many times. As we live in the hustle culture, we are almost always conditioned to say yes. And this can be a dangerous zone once one get into self-employment, especially when you're going from no clients, no project, not feeling wanted, feeling imposter syndrome, to that phase where you're like, oh, actually things do work out. I do get clients. I do have interest. People recognize that I do good work. And that's where I usually advise people to start building their awareness. Okay, now that you've got some demand, what are actually be very intentional about what are the kind of work that you want to attract, what are the kind of work that you continue want to build, what the kind of work that you start wanting to do. Because our attention and our capacity is a limited resource. When we say yes to something, we're inherently saying no to something else. Let me repeat that again. When we say yes to something, we're inherently saying no to something else. And what I've learned in the last 2 years is that one, saying no takes practice. The first time it's going to feel extremely difficult to say no to something that I guess I can squeeze you in if I work nonstop for the next months. No, I'm not working on this project. No, I can't do work at this rate anymore. No, this does not fit what I want to work on in the long term. First time it's going to be incredibly difficult. And so, just like practicing your craft, it takes time to build that comfort level. And accept that in the initial phase, there is a level of discomfort. And the second thing I've learned is that once you get comfortable with it, you can actually celebrate saying no. Every time that you say no, you're leaving space for something else that can emerge that aligns better with you. And for instance, right at this moment, my capacity is full. And I'm celebrating that because, well, it means, first of all, I have generated enough demands that I'm booked completely until the end of the year. And I won't be taking on new one-on-one coaching clients and organization consulting clients until probably until late January 2024 when I'm working remotely and settle down remotely. And there's nothing that I feel bad about this decision because this means that I have some kind of consistency with my client load and my capacity for the next few months. It's a sign where I can start putting people on a wait list. What I'm saying to people that come to me right now is that not right now, but maybe down the road, and or maybe give them a specific time frame, spring 2024. That way, it's also like a way for people who want to work with you, project who want to work with you, to understand that wow, this individual, this creative is actually in demand. You're not always all available. I've learned this, from my other great colleague of mine from the fundraising space. Her name is Sarah. Shout out to Sarah. Sarah once said to a group of consultants that we work together, and she said, think about when you go book someone who does your hair or someone who does your nails. If that person is always like, okay, come anytime, I'm open anytime during the day this week, what would you think of that? You're probably like, wow, this hair salon is awfully available. Does nobody want to do a haircut there? Compared to, okay, I've spot open not this week, but next week, Friday. How's that? Notice the difference of that tone and the perception they sets up about that practice or business. And that I want to encourage you to think will only create more demand for your work and for your service and projects. So saying no, ability to say no, shows great awareness of your capacity and that you have demand. Which brings me to the final truths that I've learned 2 years into self-employed. Is that my general comfort and your general comfort too, I want to encourage you to think, with the unknown will and will continue to increase significantly once you seek self-employment in a sustainable, enduring way. It's true that when we become self-employed, we're dealing with quite a number of uncertainties that we never had to deal with when we were in a job. Of course, the top number one uncertainty or insecurity that I hear in my coaching room is financial insecurity. When you're starting out self-employment or freelancing, you're wondering, where's my next project coming? What's my revenue next month? Can I pick up the bill? Can I hit my financial goal? In fact, that itself is sometimes the top one barrier that prevents people from seeking self-employment. I want to be very, very clear here. I'm not making a call out for people who currently have a job to say, quit your job tomorrow, self-employment, solve everything, quit your job. It's not black and white like that. I've always coached people to take calculated risks and make choices that align truly to what they want in life and in career. But I will share from personal experience for those of you who are on this path of self-employment or thinking to seek self-employment, that after 2 years of self-employment, my general comfort with uncertainty has gone up significantly. And that actually I did not expect at all when I started out. Because I noticed that it's not just about career things or business things, it's about life things too. My anxiety with the uncertainty has, I wouldn't say that it never shows up again. That's just inhuman, but I know mechanism to cope with it and manage it better, which means I'm also setting better goals when I think about life, finance, and career and relationships and everything. I remember when I used to be an employee, when my manager used to tell me something about the organization is doing or a plan that the organization is pursuing, I would have so many questions that looking back is all revolved about discomfort around uncertainty. When is this going to happen? How is it going to affect my workload? What is everybody's part in it? What's my part in it? What happens if we don't finish on time? And now, when I do planning, I know that actually no answer is 100% certain. Even if I forecast something for the next year or so, something else which can come up that drastically, or in some ways, not so drastically, change that direction. And I know as I say this and you listen to this, you might feel fear just listening to that. That doesn't sound great. Things are not going to plan. But I have, and I'm glad to share that I seek comfort in that now, because that means I'm continuously open to new possibility and things that surprise me in a good way. So when you're doing your planning, I also encourage you to, yes, plan, do the forecast, articulate and have clarity, have that internal clarity of what you want and how you want things to go. And at the same time, leaving that open door to know that anything that you put down on the paper might not happen 100% the way that you articulated it. And how are you cultivating your mindset of being flexible and embrace uncertainty in the planning? So in the plan bucket list this year, and this is why I'm kind of calling it a better bucket list, I'm addressing that point both in the financial session. So there will be one section that's about money. I encourage you to think about what does financial enoughness or sufficiency look like for you. Because oftentimes when we have uncertainty about the future, we are thinking about we won't make enough money. But my experience has been if I ask a client to articulate what is enough, they have a very difficult time articulating that. So I'm going to put you in the spot as you go through this planning for yourself. What is that enoughness? But at the end of the planner tool, I've also put a section there where as you put everything together, I want you to think about both the qualitative measure and the quantitative measure of each goal. Meaning, the quantitative measure might be things that we are thinking in very concrete and sometimes maybe even too rigid terms. I want to make 2 films next year. That's very concrete, excellent of a goal. But through that making 2 films, what do you actually want to achieve in a state of mind? Is it, I want to be proud of my filmmaking? I want to get to a place where I'm comfortable with a certain skill set on set. That's a qualitative goal. And you might hit both dimensions of that goal, qualitative and quantitative. You might also only hit one. And sometimes it's better to hit the qualitative goal, that state of mind, than the quantitative goal. So having those buffer will help you to embrace uncertainties when things don't go according to plan. When new opportunities comes up, you're not fixated on that original course of action and you're not confined by it. So in closing, I hope that today's episode I've shared my own learning from my own experience, share some of the insights I gleaned from my clients' work about self-employment. If you're thinking about self-employment right now, or you're in the midst of going from freelancing and thinking, wow, this is actually going to be a long-term thing, I need more intentional structure, bear these factors in mind. And also, I'm very curious to hear what you've learned that surprised you. Know that I'm always one message away, and feel free to email me or message me on social media and share your own learning and reflection. Now, as we close this episode, also want to talk a little bit more about this tool, a better bucket list for independent creators, my end of year planning tool for you. So you've heard now that this bucket list, this tool is designed specifically for independent creators in mind. And there will be 5 sections in there. One is flexibility and boundaries. Second, ideal projects and clients. The more clear you are, the more that you attract the right kinds of projects and be intentional about your capacity. Section 3, money. What does financial enoughness look like for you? Section 4, creative satisfaction. In Section 5, about putting everything together into something that is concrete, clear, step by step, and at the same time leave space for change. And all this is in editable documents. As well, I'm going to provide you a section by section video walkthrough so that to guide you as you do this or complete this planning on your own. You are not alone in this process, okay? And if you're interested in getting the tool, it's available right now. And there's one or two ways to get this. One is you can, through the purchasing link, pay $15 USD, and you can get the tool. And now, because I'm so grateful for your support listening to this podcast this year, and I know some of you have supported me from day one of founding this podcast from 1.5 years ago, I want to do a limited time promotion for people who are listening here. And there's a few actions that you need to take so that you can get this planner tool completely free. Here's the 3-step action. You ready? Action 1, take a screenshot of you listening to this podcast on whatever platform you listen to, mobile or desktop. It can be on the website, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever, like YouTube. Take a screenshot. Just show that you listened to this episode. Second, join my emails so that you can keep consistent updates about the podcast and also other free creative reflection. Provide your email address so that you can verify, or I can verify rather, that you are on our list. And to join our list, I will also provide a link in the show note. You can also take my quiz on creative archetypes to join the list as well. That's another fun way to join the list. There's different ways. So join the emails and provide your email address so that I can verify you are currently on the list. The third thing is I will give you an option here. There's kind of 3A and 3B. You can do one of the two things or both things. 3.1 is that if you're on Apple Podcasts and you're an Apple user, you can leave a 5-star rating on the Everyday Thailand podcast with a comment. You have to leave a comment in this case because so that we know you did it. If you just leave a rating, we have no way to verify that you did that. And the second way, 3.2, is that if you don't use Apple Podcasts, you can post on Instagram or LinkedIn and tag me with a link to the podcast or the link to the YouTube to recommend the Everyday Talent podcast to your friends and followings. If you would like, of course, you're an Apple user, you also want to tag me on social media, I encourage you to do both. But doing one or the either, the Apple Podcast comment and rating, or the posting on social media and tag would satisfy number 3. So these are the 3 steps that you have to take in order to get the planner tool for free. Again, take a screenshot of you listening to this episode of the podcast. Second, verify that you're on my emails or join my emails if you haven't. Third, either leave a comment on Apple Podcasts or post on your own social media and tag me and share a link of the podcast to share with your friends. Following these 3 simple steps and you're in, you would need to message me or email me. I'll leave my email address and my IG and linking handle in the show note to let me know and share with me those screenshots of the 3 things that you did. Then I will provide you the planner tool for free. So we're only doing this limited time promotion until Monday, December 4. So please take actions if you want to get the planner tool for free instead of paying $15 now as you listen to this episode. After December 4th, that option of like doing this promotional offer will go away and everybody will have to pay the regular pricing. So take action now. And I also want to thank you in advance for supporting the podcast. we're doing this promotion so that more people can find this podcast and feel seen. Thank you so much for listening today. Whether you're on your self-employed journey or you're not on your self-employed creative journey and you're thinking mindfully about your creative career, I hope that you have a very fruitful, also restful and peaceful end of year. Know that you've done everything that you can this year and you're in the exact right spot and growing at the exact right pace that serve you. I will see you on the next episode.